Hey everyone, it's Lisa Stens with video number 5 in the Distress Oxide Ink series. Today I'm going to show you two different ways that you can use your stencils with these fun inks. The first way I'm going to show you is the traditional way that you would normally use stencils. I'm going to start by attaching a piece of cardstock to my mat with a piece of washi tape so it doesn't move around. Then I'm going to place my stencil right on top and put some washi tape around the edges of that as well. That way when I'm rubbing the ink on top, the stencil won't move. And this 12 by 12 stencil is from Close to My Heart stencil pack number 1 and comes with 2 other 12 by 12 stencils. So I'm going to start by taking some picked raspberry and just rubbing it around the center of that mandala image. And I'm going very gently so I don't push too hard and move the stencil. And then I'm just going to pick it up and check underneath to make sure that I got all the areas covered that I wanted. Now I'm going to go around that image again with some peacock feathers, and this is just the pretty blue that blends nicely with the pink to create a little bit of a purple. So I'm going to go very, very gently around the edges there and then go back in with a little bit of the picked raspberry to create that purple. I like the way it turned out, but I decided that I wanted it a little more muted instead of being such high contrast. I really like the high contrast, but for the card that I was thinking of, I really needed it to be a little more muted. So I'm just going around the edges with a little more of the peacock feathers. And I'm going to add a little more picked raspberry to the center as well. And by adding a little bit more ink, it's just going to soften the background just enough that I think it's going to work well with the card that I have in mind. Now I'm going to use the Simple Serif thin cuts dies and the coordinating stamp sets, and I'm going to cut the word hello out of some white daisy cardstock and then stamp it in black ink right on top. I attached the letters with some thin foam tape and then I matted the entire thing to some black cardstock to finish it off. So I started off my next card with 4 different colors and blended them together. There's just something relaxing to me about blending these colors together, and I did it on a piece of the Distress watercolor cardstock on the textured side. So I started with the mustard seed and then blended that into the abandoned coral and then blended that into the seedless preserves and then blended the seedless preserves into some chipped sapphire. And as you can tell, I'm just going back and forth with the different colors that go on top of each other. So here I'm doing the abandoned coral, going back with some of the mustard seed, and the more you go over with the two different colors that overlap, the better your blend is going to be. I'm going to go ahead and speed this part up so that you can see the colors that I'm blending together and how nicely they blend, but you don't need to see it in real time because it takes a while to go back and forth over these colors. But doesn't it look beautiful? It almost looks like a sunset to me. And now we're going to do something really cool with that same stencil we used on the first card. I'm going to go ahead and spritz the entire thing with some water and then wipe up the background. I'm going to put my card base down and I'm going to lay the wet side of that stencil right on top. And then I'm going to put a paper towel on top and hold it in place just for a minute or two, pressing down to make sure that that water that's on the other side of the stencil really sinks into the ink. And it's going to be a fun surprise when I peel it off. It bleaches it just in those areas and removes the ink just where the stencil was. So now I'm going to go ahead and blot the card base again with another paper towel just to remove that excess water. And then I'm going to use my heat tool to dry it so that I can create my card right away. I used my heart shaker window dies to cut 2 different sizes of hearts from a piece of vellum. And I'm going to use the Bloom with Grace card making stamp set to stamp a sentiment right in the middle of the smallest heart. And I'm going to use the black soot ink to stamp the sentiment right in the middle of that heart And because it's vellum, I want to make sure I heat set it. So I'm actually going to put some clear embossing powder on top and heat set it with my heat tool. So I'm going to go ahead and layer these two vellum hearts on top of each other. And I'm going to use some micro glue dots underneath. And I think I'm going to put some sparkles on top. So I know that I'm going to be covering up areas with adhesive. So I finished off my card. I added the little treasure that I had stamped on a piece of white daisy cardstock on the bottom, and I added a few of the silver glitter gems. So those are the two cards that I created with the stencils. I hope you found some inspiration and that you'll use your stencils with your Distress Oxide inks as well. Stay tuned for the very last video of my series where I'm going to teach you how to do the colorful Joseph's coat technique. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the very last video.